Hi everyone, today I'm checking out a full frame camera lens I've wanted to test for a very long time now. The Tamron 24-70mm f2.8 VC USD. This came out a few years ago to a bit of excitement. There are a few fast standard zoom lenses out there for full frame cameras, but so far this is the only one with image stabilization, something photographers have been really calling out for. It costs around £650 or $900 US, so it's hardly a budget item. But if the optics turn out to be good enough, then this could be a real one-lens solution for full-frame camera owners who are doing still photography or video work. The zoom range of 24-70mm goes from very wide angle to slight telephoto. That's not a big focal range, but it covers the basics well enough. It's your classic standard zoom range, good for capturing wide vistas or zooming in for portrait pictures. If you're using an APS-C camera, then 24-70mm won't really give you a wide angle to work with. That's why most APS-C zoom lenses start at 18mm. So it's a bit of an awkward lens for an APS-C camera, and APS-C owners could get a lens that's a lot more physically compact. This really is more of a full-frame camera lens. That maximum aperture of f2.8 means it lets in a good amount of light, and f2.8 can also give you some nicely out-of-focus backgrounds, as you can see here. And Tamron have thumbed their nose at the competition by offering image stabilization, or VC as they call it. Here's some footage without stabilization, and here it is turned on. The image is kept quite firmly still, which is great for still photography. As you pan and tilt the lens around, the stabilization is very slightly jerky in how it reacts, so it's not completely perfect for handheld video makers, but it's doing a good job overall. Let's take a look at the lens's build quality. As you can see, it's a pretty large lens. It's made of good quality plastics and it's a bit heavy. Tamron's lens designers certainly didn't set themselves any of their traditional size or weight restrictions this time. The lens is based around a metal mount which has a weather sealing gasket attached to help keep out dust and moisture. The lens's zoom ring is large and the way it turns is rather heavy and not very smooth. It turns the opposite way to Canon's lenses, but the same way as Nikon's. The lens has a pretty superfluous lock switch to keep it set at 24mm. But it'll be a very long time until such a stiff zoom mechanism starts to suffer from zoom creep. While the zoom is a bit rigid, the focus ring turns very smoothly and precisely, being very well damped. The lens features full-time manual focusing, so you can change focus at any time, and of course the front element of the lens does not turn or extend as you change focus. The autofocus motor runs very quickly, accurately and quietly, as you can see here. It sometimes needs to make a few micro adjustments before it nails focus though. Overall, the Tamron 24-70 is rather a hefty lens, but it works very nicely indeed. It's just a shame about that slightly stiff zoom ring. Well, let's take a look at image quality. We'll start with a full-frame camera, a 20-megapixel Canon 6D. At 24mm and f2.8, the lens is bitingly sharp in the middle of the image, with good contrast and neutral colours. The corners are a bit softer and darker, but still quite usable, with barely any chromatic aberration. Stop the aperture down to f4 for a very nice boost in brightness and contrast, and sharpness reaches its peak there at f5.6. Overall, a pretty nice performance at 24mm. Let's zoom into 50mm. It's pretty much the same story in the middle of the zoom range. A sharp and punchy image in the middle at f2.8, and corners which are noticeably softer. Stop down to f4 for some more resolution, and then f5.6, and finally at f8 we get very good sharpness. So still a good performance in the middle of the zoom range, but the corners are a touch softer. Finally, let's zoom in to 70mm. Again, straight from f2.8, the middle of the image is very sharp indeed. And again, the corners of the image are noticeably softer and darker, with just a little visible chromatic aberration. Stop down to f4 though, and sharpness and brightness are both greatly improved. At f5.6, the corners of the image are very sharp indeed, and the middle is ridiculously sharp. So overall, the Tamron 24-70 puts in a very solid performance on a full-frame camera. It's always very sharp in the middle of the image, straight from f2.8, and if you stop down the aperture a little bit, then you'll get sharp, bright corners. Now I'll quickly take a look at how the lens performs on an APS-C camera, in this case an 18 megapixel Canon 6DD. At 24mm and f2.8, the lens is very sharp indeed in the middle of the image. The corners are a bit softer, with noticeable chromatic aberration. Stop down to f4 or f5.6 for slight improvements in sharpness, although the chromatic aberration becomes slightly stronger. Zoom in to 50mm and the lens remains nice and sharp, although we do see a touch of ghosting. Again, the corners are a little soft at f2.8. Stop down to f4 though, or f5.6 for major improvements in those corners and fantastic sharpness in the middle of the image. Finally, at 70mm and f2.8, the lens is reasonably sharp in the middle of the image. Contrast is slightly low. Thankfully, the corners are not much worse, although chromatic aberration does rear its ugly head again. Stop the aperture down to f4 though for another big improvement in sharpness, and at f5.6, the lens is very sharp in the corners indeed, and the middle of the image is also very impressive. So overall, on an APS-C camera, the Tamron lens works well enough at f2.8, although your corners will be on the soft side. Stop down the aperture for fantastic image quality. Okay then, let's take a look at distortion and vignetting on a full-frame camera. It's the usual suspects here. Barrel distortion at 24mm with dark corners at f2.8. Corners are a bit brighter at f4 and fine from f5.6. Zoom in to 38mm and that distortion straightens out. Zoom all the way into 70mm and we see some moderate pincushion distortion. The edges of the image are certainly quite dark at f2.8. Again, stop down to f4 for an improvement and f5.6 for bright corners. All in all, that's quite an average showing for a fast standard zoom lens. The lens can focus as closely as about 38 centimeters. That's good enough for close-up pictures of flowers and other small subjects, although it won't be mistaken for a macro lens. At f2.8, the close-up image quality is very slightly soft. Stop down to f4 for a lot more sharpness close up. Let's see how the Tamron lens copes with shooting close to bright lights. Admittedly, not very well. We are catching a considerable amount of flaring here, probably from the lens's large glass elements. It's not a complete disaster, but you'll definitely want to be using the lens hood when you're shooting on a sunny day. Finally, Bokeh. This lens can give you quite nicely out of focus backgrounds. The quality of those backgrounds is generally okay, although sometimes things can get a bit busy looking, with highlighting around certain points of light. Not a very good performance here, although at wider angles the Bokeh seems to be a bit smoother. But at the end of the day, the Tamron 24-70mm f2.8 VC USD is an excellent package. Although it's pretty big and heavy, the build quality and the functionality are very good indeed, and its optics are nice and sharp. Its image stabilization gives this fast standard zoom lens a big advantage over the competition. If I could only have one lens for my full-frame camera to do all my still photography and video work, then this would definitely be the one. Sharp and comprehensive, it's a great lens which comes highly recommended.